Okay, so we were able to insert a couple parts into the list. Now we would like to list them, or basically show the content of the list. So let's go back here. And so we've created the insert method before. So right now under accessor, I am going to do a toString method. And actually, I'm going to create a toString method. So let me just go ahead and do a toString method by itself. So let's go over here. This will be a toString method for the list. And what we'll do is we will concatenate a string with all of the returns from the node get. So the technique will be this here, the get product. Let's see if we can capitalize on that. So first, public, we're going to return a string. Okay, that will be the actual list. And we're going to call this method toString. We're going to do a few things here. I'm going to create an empty string, call it myString. And eventually what I'm going to do at the end is simply return myString once everything is done. Right? So we need to do something with myString. As you can see here, squiggly line, because I didn't assign a value for it. So we're going to do a while loop here. And in this loop, we're going to evaluate, or basically set up the traversing. So let me put curly brace and curly brace. So let me just make sure I have the right curly braces. Here you go. This is where the traversing will happen. But I have to give it an initial position where I could create a pointer to move around, starting from the head until I reach the tail. Well, what do you mean by head? Well, it's a node type, right? So definitely a parts node, right? Or a product node. So this would be a product node. And we're going to call this one our current. So that's going to be the one we're going to use to go from page to page or node to node. This will be our current node, and we're going to make it equal to head, the top. Here, we're going to test if we reached the bottom or the tail. So in other words, is current, and as long as it's not equal to null, what you're going to do is you're going to stay in this loop. So somehow, within this loop, we need to be able to get out of there. So the loop control will simply be, okay, how do I set my current to the next item? Well, we have a method getNext. Let's go ahead and use it. So current will be equal to this current dot next. So you're updating it, or dot get next. This one. We're updating it to that. Well, that's great. That lets me go through. Now notice I still have a squiggly red line under my string. That's because we haven't done anything to string. Let's do something to it right here. So while we're traversing, let's concatenate. Let's take myString and plus equal. That's a simple concatenation, which means previous value of string, add to it whatever I'm going to do on the right-hand side. Well, what are we going to do? Well, what are you pointing at? So we're going to use the current dot. Well, we're going to need to get the product. Now remember, get the product, let's go back here, returns a product. Well, that's great. Let's try it out. Let's try it out and see if it works. And let me put a semicolon here. And let me see if I am not messing anything up here. Still have a squiggly line going on in there. That's because it doesn't see it as a string. Let me see. Let's go ahead and do a toString. And let's put a semicolon here. Nope, that's not the problem. Let me see why it's a squiggly line here. Ah, okay. My string was not initialized. Let's give it an empty string. So we're going to start with an empty string. All right, so let's try this, and then I'll do the toString thing if things don't work. So I am just going to go ahead and test this thing out. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to remove all this stuff here. I don't need it, right? I don't need any of this stuff. Just so we can clean on aisle 5. Here you go. So we simply need, at this stage, oh, I cleaned too much. Let me just do an undo and just keep one thing. Let's see here, edit, undo, backspace. I just want to keep this one right here, right? We need the list, right? So without it, you got nothing. So let's go ahead and delete this part, and let's go ahead and delete this part. Right, so now we're good. So we've created the list. Now what I would like to do is simply print the list. Well, system.out, system.out.println, and we're going to print my list. Let's see if that will work. Let's run this thing. And sure enough, it works. Except right here, I need to do add a /n in here for the next product. So it's working just fine. So let's go back to here. And while I was concatenating, let's go ahead and add plus a /n here to separate one from the other. So let's go ahead and run it again. And there you have it. So now what it's doing, it's showing you that I have a product here. Now let's make them different, obviously. So this will be 13, this one will be 2500, and this one, instead of being an engine, we're going to put a belt. Okay, all right, and let's say we have 33 of those. And let's run it. And there you have it. So the first item on the list, starting from the head, is your belt. That was the last one added at the end. The first one we added was the engine. So can we add more? Can we do more? So let's go ahead and add more products. So let me just copy this. I can copy here and do another one. Just go below it. Paste. We're going to call this one P3. And this one, where product ID will be, let's say, 5. Let's call it a transmission. Those are awfully big parts. All right. Oh, the belts. I don't want them to be $2,500. That's an expensive belt. So $25 is good. For the transmission, I'll make it $1,500. And I've got 2 of those. Right, so that's a little more reasonable for a shop. And guess what? I'm going to have to insert it into the list. So my list dot insert P3. All right, well, let's see how that works. And there you have it. Okay, so notice the engine is at the bottom because that was the beginning of the list. And the first item that comes out is the last item in, right? So last in, first out kind of an order in terms of how this while loop was set up. Okay, we could have gone the other way. So it all depends now how you want this data structure to behave. Do you want it to behave like a queue, or do you want it to behave like a stack, like it is doing right now? So we can do all sorts of variations in terms of access. Right now, we have a linked list that allows us to add items and traverse it simply by printing the actual data structure that we created, my list. How about if I wanted to remove an item? Well, then you'll have to decide which item you want to remove. Do you want to remove it based on the fact that it's a particular item, based on its ID, and so on? So that's another project. So we're going to leave it here. So now you've seen how this is done. So we're going to do that project in a next series. So this ends this series, and I'm going to provide you with the code on, so stay tuned. I'll provide you with this code, and the link will be below the video, and it will take you to my GitHub account, okay? I'll see you then.